People like to think of Neanderthals as simple. Big foreheads, big clubs, simple thoughts. The classic caveman dragging his knuckles and grunting. We see them as a rough draft of us. A failed experiment that eventually faded away, leaving the stage for the main act, Homo sapiens. But that picture is wrong. It's a caricature drawn from a few old bones and a lot of old prejudice. The more we find, the more we dig, the more we learn, the smarter they get. They weren't a rough draft. They were a different kind of human living and thinking and surviving for hundreds of thousands of years in a tough world. And they did it with tools. So what was their smartest tool? That question isn't as simple as it sounds. What does smart even mean? Does it mean the most complex to make? The most effective at its job? Or the one that tells us the most about their minds? It's not about finding a single shiny object in a museum case. It's about understanding a way of thinking. To get there, we have to peel back the layers of their technology. We have to start with the classic image and see why it's incomplete. For a long time, the main tool associated with Neanderthals and their ancestors was the hand axe. The Acheulean hand axe. It's a beautiful, teardrop-shaped piece of stone, flaked on both sides to a sharp edge. It was the Swiss Army knife of the Paleolithic. You could butcher an animal, dig for roots, scrape a hide, or chop wood. It's a masterpiece of function. Holding one feels good. It fits in your palm. You can feel the balance. Making one takes skill. You have to know how to strike a rock just right, to see the tool hiding inside the raw stone. For over 1,000,000 years, this was the cutting edge of technology. It worked. And because it worked so well, for so long some people saw it as a sign of stagnation. They thought these early humans found a good trick and then just stopped thinking. They made the same tool over and over for 1,000 generations. Smart, but not innovative. That was the old story. But Neanderthals inherited this technology and then took it to a whole new level. They moved past the simple hand axe. They developed a whole new way of working with stone. We call their toolkit the Mousterian, and its signature move was something called the Levallois technique. This is where you start to see the real sparks of a different kind of intelligence. The Levallois technique isn't about just whacking a rock until it's sharp. It's a prepared core technology. It's about foresight. It's like a 3D puzzle you have to solve in your head before you even start. Imagine a Neanderthal toolmaker. He picks up a good-sized, flattish cobble of flint. He doesn't just start chipping away at the edge to make it sharp. Instead, he starts chipping away at the top face. He carefully flakes off small pieces around the perimeter, shaping the core like a turtle shell. He's not making a tool yet. He's making a platform. He is preparing the stone. Every chip he takes off is a setup for the final, single, perfect strike. He has an image in his mind of the finished product. He knows its exact shape and size. He knows the physics of how flint fractures. He turns the core over and over, judging the angles. Then, when the core is perfectly prepared, he strikes the platform he made at one end. And with that one blow, a single, large, sharp flake detaches. This flake is the final tool. It's a pre-designed blank. It's thin, sharp on all sides, and ready to be used as a knife, a scraper, or a spear point. The core is now just a piece of waste, its purpose fulfilled. This is a huge cognitive leap. It's the difference between improvisation and planning. Making a hand axe is a process of reduction. You take a big rock and make it smaller. The Levallois technique is a process of production. You create a core that is a machine for making standardized parts. It requires abstract thought, careful sequencing of actions, and a deep understanding of your materials. It's efficient. From one core, you could produce several perfect flakes, all ready to go. It shows a mind that could plan, visualize a future outcome, and execute a complex series of steps to get there. For a long time, many archaeologists would have pointed to the Levallois technique as the smartest thing a Neanderthal ever did. It's pure stoneworking genius, it's a clear sign of an advanced mind, and it is. But stone wasn't their whole world. The story gets even more interesting when we look at the things that don't survive as well as rocks. In a couple of sites in France, archaeologists found something that didn't look like much at first. They found pieces of bone from the ribs of deer or other large animals. These bones were worn down at one end, polished smooth with a kind of rounded, glossy tip. They weren't weapons, they weren't for butchering, they were too soft, too delicate. For years, nobody was quite sure what they were. Then they compared them to tools used by modern leatherworkers. They were a perfect match for a tool called a lissoir, or a smoother. When you process an animal hide, it ends up stiff and rough. To make it soft, flexible, and more water resistant, you have to work it. You have to rub it, stretch it, and compress the fibers. A lissoir is the perfect tool for this. The polished bone tip, when rubbed against the hide, makes the leather supple and strong. Finding a lissoir in a Neanderthal site was a big deal. First, it showed they were using materials other than stone in sophisticated ways. They understood that bone had different properties than flint, it was flexible, it was smooth, and it wouldn't cut the hide. They were selecting the right material for a specific, delicate job. This wasn't just about brute survival. This was about craft. It was about making better clothes, better shelters. It was about improving the quality of their lives. Second, the lissoir was thought to be a Homo sapiens invention. It was one of the tools that supposedly marked our own species as more advanced. Finding it in Neanderthal hands, at a time before modern humans were widespread in Europe, completely blurred that line. It suggested that either Neanderthals invented this tool on their own, or there was a transfer of knowledge between the two groups much earlier and more complex than we thought. Either way, it makes the Neanderthals look a lot smarter. They weren't just banging rocks together. They were skilled craftspeople, so we have planned stone tools and subtle bone tools. That's already a much more complex picture, but neither of these is the smartest thing they ever made. The smartest thing isn't even a single tool. It's a substance. It's a material they invented. It's the world's first synthetic material, created through a process that looks a lot like applied chemistry. They made glue. Specifically, they made birch bark pitch. This is a black, sticky tar-like substance that is an incredibly effective adhesive and waterproofing agent. And it doesn't just ooze out of a tree. You can't find it lying on the ground. You have to make it. The process is so complex that for years, many researchers didn't believe Neanderthals could have possibly figured it out. Think about the problem they were trying to solve. A Levallois point is a fantastic spear tip. It's sharp and deadly, but how do you attach it to a wooden shaft? You can try to jam it into a split in the wood and tie it with animal sinew or plant fiber. That might work for a little while, but on a powerful thrust, the stone point will shift, wobble, or fall out. It's not reliable. A wobbly spear point is a useless spear point, and when you're hunting a massive, angry beast like a woolly rhino, you need your gear to work perfectly every time. The solution is to glue it on. A solid bed of adhesive holds the stone point fast, making the entire spear a single, solid unit. The birch bark pitch is the perfect glue for the job. When warm, it's a thick paste. When it cools, it sets rock hard. Here's why making it is so impressive. You can't just burn birch bark in an open fire. If you do, the bark and all the valuable tar just turn to ash. To get the pitch, you have to heat the bark in an environment with very little or no oxygen. This process is called dry distillation. It's a chemical transformation. You are breaking down the complex organic matter of the bark into a new substance. How did they do it? Archaeologists and experimental scientists have tried to replicate the process using only materials a Neanderthal would have had. There are a few ways it could work. One method is to roll the bark up tightly, stick it in a small pit in the ground, and light a fire on top of it. The heat bakes the bark below, and the tar slowly seeps out and collects at the bottom of the pit. Another, more advanced method might have involved creating a simple container system. Maybe they put the bark in a clay-lined hole or a primitive container and heated it from the outside. Regardless of the exact method, think about the cognitive steps involved. First, there's the initial leap of imagination. A Neanderthal had to look at a birch tree, at its papery, flaky bark, and somehow understand that a completely different material, a black sticky glue, was hiding inside it. This is not obvious. It's a profound insight into the hidden properties of natural materials. Second, it's a multi-step sequential process that takes time. You have to gather the bark. You have to prepare a pit or a container. You have to build a fire, and then you have to manage that fire carefully. This isn't a task you can do in 5 minutes. It requires planning and patience. Third, and this is the most critical part, it requires precise temperature control. If the fire is too cold, the distillation won't happen. If the fire is too hot, the bark in the pitch will just incinerate. Experimental archaeology has shown that the sweet spot is between 340 and 400 degrees Celsius. Neanderthals had no thermometers. They had to control the temperature of their fire by instinct, by feel, by watching the color of the smoke or the glow of the embers. They had to maintain this temperature for a significant amount of time. This is an incredibly sophisticated skill. It's proto-chemistry. It's a controlled industrial process. We know they did this. We have the proof. Archaeologists have found lumps of this black pitch, some with Neanderthal fingerprints preserved in them. More importantly, they have found it on their tools. At a site in Germany, they found 2 Levallois points with clear remnants of birch bark pitch and traces of wood from the shaft. The adhesive was applied in a specific way, mixed with a bit of charcoal, likely to make it less brittle, and used to haft the point to a spear. At a site in Italy, analysis showed the pitch was used not just to glue the stone point on, but also to treat the wooden handle, maybe to make it easier to grip or to protect it from moisture. This is the smartest Neanderthal tool because it isn't just a tool, it's a technology. It's the creation of something new. It's taking raw materials from the environment and transforming them through a complex, controlled process into something with entirely new properties. This adhesive then enabled the creation of another, even more important technology, the composite tool. A composite tool is anything made of multiple distinct parts. A simple sharpened stick is not a composite tool. A rock held in your hand is not a composite tool, but a stone spear point glued to a wooden shaft is. This is a revolutionary concept. It's a system. You have the stone component, the wood component, and the binding component, the pitch. Each part is made separately and then assembled. This way of thinking of breaking down a problem into smaller parts and creating specialized components to solve it is a hallmark of modern human cognition. We do it all the time. Your car is a composite tool. Your phone is a composite tool. The ability to create things by assembling different materials is fundamental to our technological world. And Neanderthals were doing it 250,000 years ago. The birch bark pitch and the composite spirit created changes our entire understanding of their capabilities. It shows a mind capable of abstract thought, long-term planning, complex problem-solving, and fine motor control. It reveals a deep knowledge of their environment, not just what was edible or dangerous, but the hidden chemical potential of the plants around them. It's a level of technical skill that was, until recently, thought to be unique to Homo sapiens. It proves they were not just surviving day to day, they were engineers, they were chemists. But maybe we're still thinking about smart in too narrow a way. Is the smartest tool the one that's best for killing or building? Or is there another kind of intelligence, one that's harder to see in the archaeological record? What about the intelligence of art, of symbolism, of culture? For a long time, the consensus was that Neanderthals had none of this. The world of symbols, of meaning beyond the practical, was our world. They lived in a world of just things. But piece by piece, that wall is crumbling too. At a site in Croatia called Krapina, archaeologists found a set of eagle talons. This wasn't just a pile of leftover bones from a meal. The talons had cut marks and polishing on them that showed they had been deliberately removed, prepared, and likely strung together to be worn as a necklace or a bracelet. This was from 130,000 years ago. An eagle talon has no practical purpose. You can't eat it. You can't use it to scrape a hide. Its only purpose is adornment. It's a statement. It might signify status or identity or have some spiritual meaning. We can't know for sure. But we know it's not about simple survival. It's about creating meaning. It's an artifact of a symbolic mind. In other sites, we find pigments, lumps of black manganese and red ochre that were ground up. What for? Maybe they used it to tan hides, but maybe they used it to paint their bodies. To create patterns on their skin for rituals, for ceremonies, for intimidation, or just for beauty. Body painting is a universal human behavior, a way of defining ourselves and our place in the social world. The presence of these pigments suggests Neanderthals might have shared this symbolic behavior. The most profound piece of evidence, however, comes from deep inside a cave in France called Bruniquel. About 300 meters from the cave entrance, in a place of total darkness, someone, long ago, went into a large chamber. There they broke off hundreds of stalagmites from the cave floor. They selected pieces of a similar length and arranged them into 2 large rings and several smaller piles. Then, they built fires on top of some of these structures, leaving behind burnt bone and calcite. The dating of this structure is astonishing. It was built 176,000 years ago. The only humans in Europe at that time were Neanderthals, no Homo sapiens. This was their work. What is it? It's not a shelter, it's too deep in the cave. It's not a pen for animals. It has no obvious practical function. It is a deliberate, planned construction in the deep, dark, dangerous part of the world. It must have had a social or spiritual purpose. It was a place for something to happen. A ritual, a gathering, a story? We will never know. But it is undeniable proof of a complex social organization and a mind capable of imbuing a space with meaning. It's an act of pure symbolism. To organize a group of people to go deep underground to break and carry all those stalagmites, to build something so specific that requires a level of social cooperation and abstract purpose that is deeply, profoundly human. So, what does this have to do with the smartest tool? Maybe an object like an eagle talon necklace or a structure like the Brunicle rings is the real answer. They aren't tools for manipulating the physical world, but tools for manipulating the social and spiritual world. They are the hardware of culture. And what could be smarter than that? So, where does that leave us? What was the smartest Neanderthal tool ever found? If you want a single physical object that showcases pure technical brilliance, it's the birch bark pitch. It is the product of a mind that could think like a scientist, an engineer, and a craftsman. It required foresight, planning, and a mastery of fire and chemistry that is nothing short of astounding. It enabled them to build better, more reliable tools, which in turn made them more effective hunters and survivors. It shatters the old image of the simple-minded brute, but if you define smart more broadly to include the full spectrum of human intelligence, then the answer is more abstract. The smartest tool might be the eagle talon, not for what it is, but for what it represents, the birth of personal adornment, and, with it, personal identity. Or it might be the Brunicle rings, a testament to their ability to work together, to shape their world not just for survival, but for a higher symbolic purpose. In the end, maybe the question is flawed. There is no single smartest tool. There is only a growing mountain of evidence that shows the Neanderthal mind was not a simpler version of our own. It was a complex, creative, and resourceful mind, fully capable of technological innovation, artistic expression, and symbolic thought. The real discovery isn't any one tool, it's the toolmaker. The true find is the Neanderthal mind itself. For a century, we looked at their remains and saw a primitive failure. Now, we see a different kind of success. We see people who mastered a harsh world for hundreds of thousands of years. And they controlled fire, they crafted sophisticated tools, they cared for their sick and elderly, they buried their dead, and they decorated their bodies. They built things in the dark. The smartest thing they left behind wasn't a piece of stone or bone or even a revolutionary glue. It was the collection of all these things, the clues that, when pieced together, force us to remake our own image of them. They show us that the path of human evolution was not a single, straight line leading to us, but a branching, complex tree with many different brilliant ways of being human.